All right, but let's go ahead and begin with China. The U.S. and what appears to be a failure on the part of the Trump administration to use toughness as promised as a negotiating tool. Fact is, it may have actually backfired on us, a conversation that we've been having with you and we're now going to have with somebody who knows a lot about this. Sourabh Gupta is a policy specialist at the Institute for China-American Studies here in D.C. So here's what's most interesting. Suddenly we see China feeling like it was getting slapped around by the United States. So they went out and started doing deals with Russia, 5 other countries. Today, we learned, Mr. Gupta, that they did a deal with Turkey, which is somewhat surprising if you look at it in historic terms. It seems to me that China is not going to stop doing what it started doing as a result of the U.S. pressure. In fact, we may have forced them to get bigger. Am I wrong?
I think you're absolutely correct. This is where China is going. It's becoming more multilateral. President Xi at the G20 put it very clearly. His priorities were an investment deal with the Europeans, the regional comprehensive economic partnership with the rest, with Asia writ large, and a deal with Japan, Korea, and China. These must happen within the next year. So he is going ahead and making these deals. And of course, opportunities like this with President Erdogan, where Turkey gets to also diversify its economic relations, obviously helps both parties. So this is the trend.
From a relationship standpoint, we have a really bright person on our staff, Christy I don't know if you know her, but she says her sources are telling her in China that Xi Jinping is treating this turnabout, this reversal on the part of Trump, as if it didn't even happen. He seems to have lost trust in the United States' ability to negotiate in good faith. Am I reading that correctly?
To a certain extent, yes, he did, because he was the one at Buenos Aires in December 2018 who came and was very forthcoming and said, I'm going to do this, and this. And China put a lot on the table. And here's the reason I think your views are perfectly on the spot. China put a lot on the table, and the U.S. kept asking for more. And at that point of time, China said, which was early May onwards, you know, you need to show up at the table and put something there. Otherwise, this is not going to happen this way. And that's what put Trump in a dilemma, because he just asked, and then suddenly he needs to give.
You know, I just showed that graph. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but in that graph, we see countries like the Philippines, New Zealand, and Australia shifting their trade balance away from the United States. There it is again, away from the United States and toward China. What does that tell us? And why are they doing this?
They are all integrated in supply chains. Which are located where the hub is essentially located in China. So China has become, you need to have a China strategy if you want to have a manufacturing strategy. So a lot of these countries they have a China strategy. Of course, guys like New Zealand and Australia who sell commodities, China is growing very fast, so that's obviously a place you're going to sell commodities to. But here's where you really need to fear about. Right now, China trades more with all these countries than the U.S. does. It's soon going to come a day when China will consume more from each of these countries than the U.S. does, and that's the day the U.S. is going to have. That's the day the U.S. will really have to think through this very, very hard of how it surrendered its dominance in Asia.
What is the timetable on something like that? The average American, or our viewers are watching us right now, and they're trying to get a fix on not just where things are going, because it seems pretty obvious. Things are going toward more dominance. I don't know if it's complete dominance, but more dominance toward China. What's the timetable on that?
The timetable, I would say, is by the latter part of the 2020s, China is going to become the biggest economy in the world in dollar terms. And sometime in the mid-2030s, China is going to become the biggest consumer, even bigger than the United States. Right now, it'll be the bigger economy in the 2020s, but because consumption is not such a large share of its economy, that date will be pushed back a little more.
I think Trump is trying to stop that train. Can that train be stopped?
No, that train cannot be stopped, and it's a dangerous strategy trying to stop it in these sort of unilateral ways. Let me explain to you. In the late 1990s, there were bans on satellite technology to China. What happened is China still got that technology. China still indigenously did the innovation that it needed to do, and China just did not have that dependence. And that's going to happen in the core technologies area also in this decade going
Well,
forward.
it seems, sir, that history then has repeated itself.
Repeating itself.
My thanks to you, Sourabh Gupta. Thanks for your knowledge and for sharing.